Thank you. And I guess my presentation leads nicely from that work. So thanks for that. And apologies, I can't see my slides, so I'm just going to hopefully be able to see them here. So thanks a lot. So my name's Mel. I'm from an organisation called the Social Deck. We are a for-purpose business. We do specialise in behaviour change as part of what we do. And this project was to understand behavioural insights to design place-based practice change strategies for two cane growing regions. And that's the Mackay Whitsunday and the Lower Burdekin. So the work was commissioned by the Great Barrier Reef Foundation. And it's part of the Australian Government's Reef Trust Partnership. So I just want to go through, I guess, firstly, the objective of the work, a little bit different maybe to what had been done before, particularly around this sort of being a place-based overall sort of practice change strategy. It was to increase grower participation in some of the projects that are happening in those regions, but also to maybe get some of those growers who aren't currently involved in those projects or the practices. So we wanted those, whatever we did to support basically what was happening on the ground. Particularly, we're looking at the reduction of DIN, so reduction and more efficient use of nitrogen, around the behaviours around the use of pesticides, and also behaviours around irrigation management techniques. So what did we do? Our process was, look, there's a lot of information out there already, a lot of research that has been done, as we know, on the human dimensions and some of the behavioural drivers, as well as some other, I guess, behaviour change projects that have been sort of throughout the cane growing regions. So we did do a really thorough review of that, and then we basically then tested that through some engagement with stakeholders, with growers, and with, the delivery providers, people who are on the ground, extension officers and that sort of thing. And we also had a survey go out to that was specifically targeted at growers. It was through Facebook, so we did. It is mostly, I guess, people. There's a certain bias in that survey, but we did get to quite a lot of growers that were not currently involved in projects. So sort of a boosted post. And then we tested our findings with stakeholders and with some growers prior to developing our strategies. I guess the key thing about this is that what we found was that there is, as I'm sure many of you are aware, a very wide range of influences on water quality improvement practices in sugarcane, which sort of brought up, I guess, some challenges for us, because we do a lot of behaviour change, and this is actually the first time we had been involved with reef projects and the sugarcane industry. And we go through this sort of process, which you may not be able to see very well on your screen, but basically we start with identifying behaviours, defining the problem quite specifically so that we can really understand the drivers to those specific behaviours. And then we really want to understand the influences on those behaviours, categorise them, learn from what's happened in the past, and then develop, test and refine any intervention that we might be putting forward. So we do this we have done for a lot of different issues, things like smoking cessation and other sorts of issues, these sort of end-to-end behaviour change projects, which have been, a lot of the time quite successful through evaluation. But one of the things, I guess, that's a really big, challenge in this area is that there are many specific behaviours. As I'm sure many of you are aware, they are unique to growers, and they're often unique to their context as well, or to their region, as we found. And understanding those behaviours actually requires a lot of expertise. And so, it's a difficult thing to even get to the nuts of what needs to happen for each grower. The implementation would need to be supported by people who are already pretty busy on the ground. So that was another challenge. And we also found that different stakeholders had really different opinions about the extent of what practice change should happen. Should it be precision agriculture and 6 easy steps and, or was it enough to just make some small changes to get on the road? So, what we found was that there was no single behaviour change theory that would actually kind of, fit nicely to this problem. So we used a couple of ways of mapping theories and influences just to make sure that we're able to consider all of the relevant influences and the broader system. So from that past research and from our insights from interviews in the survey, we developed a detailed list of barriers and enablers associated with water quality improvement practices. We organised this into themes. So we used 2 related behaviour change frameworks here. So the first is the theoretical domains framework, which actually starts with sort of 33 theories, and then that's sort of into around about 14 domains. Then we selected those domains that were particularly relevant to this practice change. We also then mapped those domains into the COM-B model of behaviour change. So understanding capability, motivation and opportunity and how that influences behaviour. So that was a framework that we used. And that sort of provides our theoretical lens. So what were the influences? I'm not going to go through all of these. You see how quickly you can speed read the slide because we only have a limited amount of time. It's quite a complex area. But I will just give you a flavour, I guess, of the key influences that we found. Firstly, starting with capability. So knowledge we found to be very important. So you have to know what's available and maybe what you can do. And, you know, that also comes into things like record keeping, best practices, etc. So it's important for farmers to be aware and to know what might be possible. And then the skills part of the capability is around, particularly around having the technical and digital skills, but even sometimes we say literacy skills, but, you know, some of the, I guess the justifications around some of the practices are quite technical. So, you know, you can't be reading, like you don't want to expect farmers to read technical papers to understand why they should do something. Opportunity influences, lots of these. Social influences and environmental context and resources were the 2 kind of domains that are really important here. But I think as we've heard already, they both perceived injunctive norms and descriptive norms. So what their peers, other farmers think about practice change and also what other farmers are actually doing, what other growers are doing are really important, as well as other social influences. So family, partners, advice, relationships, resellers of fertiliser, things like that were really important to the sorts of influences on behaviour. Then the environmental context and resources, also really important. The sugar price, the fertiliser prices, the perceived and actual costs associated with practice change, whether people had access to equipment, you know, whether they knew about grants for equipment, and that sort of thing were really important in terms of that opportunity. And motivation influences, 4 really key domains here. Beliefs about consequences. So what would actually happen if I change behaviour? Is it going to make any difference? Well, I mean, to be honest, most of the time it wasn't around making a difference to the reef. It's about whether it's going to affect my productivity, whether it's going to affect my profits. And that's a really key sort of consideration, as well as the time it might take, the effort I might have to put in. A lot of emotional influences, thank you. There is a real lack of trust in the area around, particularly around government intervention, around regulation, and it has to be taken into account. There was a feeling that that growers particularly in the Mackay Whitsunday area had been scapegoated. They were the scapegoats for the impacts on the reef. And related to that, I guess, a sense of identity was seen as really important, as well as, you know, some of the motivating factors around land stewardship. Not too sure what's happened there. The mechanisms of actions were then translated. These become our outcomes in our theory of change as well. I'll let you read through those, but I guess I want to say there's some really key things. They're all really the influences made into action, but increasing pride, sense of identity, social diffusion, those descriptive and injunctive norms, really, really important. I do just want to quickly run through, this was the other kind of system mapping that we did, which was around context. So it's important to understand all those sort of individual influences, but it's also understanding what level of intervention we might need to put in. Sorry, I'm going to go over just a tiny, tiny bit because this is complex work and I don't know how to put it in 10 minutes, to be honest. But I won't be long. I do just want to say that these, and I'll let you read this slide if you can, and hit me up afterwards if you want more information, but there's different levels of the system that we really need to take into account when we're looking to target interventions. And this is the framework. So we're taking those moderators, those contextual things in different levels of the system. We're looking at what behaviour change techniques we might be able to use that will affect our mechanism of actions, and that will lead to behavioural change. So I won't go through all of this, but basically there was a set of criteria that we needed to make sure that we stuck to in terms of designing our interventions. And we did a bunch of other things. So we did journey mapping with typologies of farmers in the different regions, looked at the different sorts of interventions we could use. And my last slide, this is the results, and I don't have time to go through them, but if you want to check it out, one of the main interventions that we are doing is called CaneRise. It's called canerise.com. You can access it at canerise.com.au, and basically it ticks those boxes of increasing knowledge, awareness and confidence of growers, feeling part of something positive, sense of identity, and really builds on their own sense of stewardship. And importantly, it's about pulling them in rather than pushing things at growers. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.